Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. Prominent Iranian nuclear scientist Mohsen Fakhrizadeh has been assassinated in an attack outside Tehran. The reports of his assassination were confirmed by the Defense Ministry and the Iranian armed forces to the state media. 4 Iranian nuclear scientists were reportedly assassinated by the Israeli regime between 2010 and 2012. Saudi Arabia's Foreign Minister Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud says his country enjoys cordial ties with Pakistan and is committed to promoting them further. Meeting his Pakistani counterpart Shah Mahmood Qureshi on the sidelines of an OIC Ministerial Council meeting in Niger, the Saudi Foreign Minister appreciated Pakistan's efforts for establishing peace in the region. The two leaders also discussed the latest situation in occupied Kashmir and the role of the OIC in this regard. In India, thousands of farmers have staged a protest in New Delhi against reforms they say are against their interests. Farmers defied barricades to enter the capital despite police trying to stop them with tear gas and water cannons. They are demanding revocation of bills passed in September, fearing the new reforms will leave them at the mercy of big corporates. The Ethiopian Prime Minister has told African peace envoys that his government will protect civilians in the fight against Tigray rebels. The meeting in Addis Ababa comes a day after he announced the military was beginning the final phase of an offensive in the Tigray region. Hundreds of people have been killed and thousands have crossed into Sudan since the fighting began on November the 4th. Germany has surpassed 1 million COVID-19 cases with more than 15,000 deaths so far. In India, the virus has claimed more than 135,000 lives with 9.3 million infections. Meanwhile, Pakistan has reported 54 fatalities and over 3,100 cases overnight as the death toll nears 8,000 with more than 389,000 infections. Globally, the virus has claimed at least 1.4 million lives and infected more than 61 million people. And in cricket, Australia beat India by 66 runs in the first one international of a 3-match series in Sydney. They restricted India to 308 in reply to a huge target of 375 runs. Stephen Smith was declared player of the match for scoring 105 runs. Those are the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Iran's top nuclear scientist Mohsen Fakhrizadeh has been assassinated in an attack outside Tehran. The reports of his assassination were confirmed by the Defense Ministry and the armed forces of Iran to the state media. He was reportedly targeted by a suicide attacker at the entrance of Absad town. Several others also reportedly killed in the incident but haven't been identified yet. A professor of physics, he was a senior scientist at the Iranian Ministry of Defense and the Armed Forces Logistics. 4 Iranian nuclear scientists were reportedly assassinated by the Israeli regime between 2010 and 2012. Saudi Arabia's Foreign Minister Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud says his country enjoys cordial ties with Pakistan and is committed to promoting them further. Meeting his Pakistani counterpart Shah Mahmood Qureshi on the sidelines of an OIC Ministerial Council meeting in Niger, the Saudi Foreign Minister appreciated Pakistan's efforts for establishing peace in the region. During the meeting, Qureshi informed his Saudi counterpart about the latest situation in occupied Kashmir and thanked Saudi Arabia for principled and permanent support on the Kashmir issue. India has once again detained former Chief Minister of occupied Kashmir, Mehbooba Mufti. Mufti was released recently after nearly a year in house arrest following India's illegal annexation of occupied Kashmir in 2019. In a series of tweets, Mufti said her daughter was also detained. She said Delhi stopped her from visiting Wahidur Rahman Para's family in Pulwama. Mufti said Para was arrested on baseless charges and lamented not being able to console his family. She slammed New Delhi's oppressive measures, saying BJP ministers and their puppets were free to move, but she was detained due to so-called security issues. Meanwhile, Indian troops have arrested hundreds of innocent people ahead of local elections in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. UN Chief Antonio Guterres has assured he will seriously examine the dossier submitted by Islamabad. It highlighted India's state-sponsored terrorism inside Pakistan. In an interview, permanent representative to the UN, Munir Akram, said Guterres lauded Pakistan for anti-terrorism efforts. He said the UN chief was asked to pressure India to stop sponsoring terrorism in Pakistan and refrain from subversive activities. Akram said the Secretary General also appreciated Pakistan's role for the regional peace. In India, thousands of farmers have staged a protest in New Delhi against reforms they say are against their interests. Farmers defied barricades to enter the capital despite police trying to stop them with tear gas and water cannons. The new bills can pave the way for the government to stop buying grain at guaranteed prices. Farmers fear the reforms will leave them at the mercy of big corporates. They are demanding the government to immediately roll back the bills. Pakistan says it remains committed to an Afghan-led and Afghan-owned peace process. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said this in a meeting with acting Afghan Foreign Minister Hanif Atmar in Niamey. On the sidelines of an OIC summit, Qureshi emphasized on the need to remain vigilant of spoilers who do not wish to see peace in the region. He said the Afghan peace process offers an opportunity for the refugees to return to their homeland with dignity and honor. Referring to the recent visit of Prime Minister Imran Khan to Kabul, Qureshi said Pakistan remained committed to deepening cooperation in diverse fields. Atmar appreciated Pakistan's efforts for reconstruction and development of Afghanistan. The Ethiopian Prime Minister has told African peace envoys that his government will protect civilians in the fight against Tigray rebels. The meeting in Addis Ababa comes a day after he announced the military was beginning the final phase of an offensive in the Tigray region. The government had given Tigray rebels until Wednesday to lay down their arms or face an assault on Mekelle, the regional capital of over 500,000 people. It accuses rebels of starting the war by attacking federal troops at a base in Tigray 3 weeks ago. The rebels say the attack was a preemptive strike. Hundreds of people have been killed and thousands have crossed into Sudan since the fighting began on November the 4th. The United Nations estimates over 1 million people will need aid as a result of the conflict. Turkey has rejected a non-binding resolution by the European Parliament against Ankara on the Miraz and Cyprus issue. Turkey's foreign ministry says the European Parliament is disconnected from reality and prejudiced on the Cyprus issue. Spokesperson Hemi Aksoy said the resolution was clearly dictated by the Greek Cypriot administration. Ankara called on the EU to take into account the presence of the Turkish Cypriots and the commitments made to them in 2004. France and the European Parliament are pushing for sanctions on Turkey after President Tayyip Erdogan visited northern Cyprus. The MEPs voted overwhelmingly in favor of a non-binding resolution to support Athens in its row with Ankara. Saudi-led coalition forces have carried out air raids on barracks of Houthi rebels in the Yemeni capital, Sana'a. The coalition said 2 mines were destroyed in the south of the Red Sea. The airstrikes were conducted after a Houthi missile attack on Saudi oil facilities in Jeddah. There was no immediate report on possible casualties. Houthi forces carried out many missile and drone strikes on civilian airports and oil facilities in Saudi Arabia. In France, a video of police officers beating a black man in Paris has sparked outrage nationwide and on social media.
Another incident has ignited outrage as French authorities grapple with long-standing accusations of police racism and brutality. 3 French policemen followed a black man inside his music studio in Paris after they saw him without a face mask. They threw a tear gas grenade at the studio, shouted racial abuse at him, and took him in custody for 48 hours. While the police say they have suspended one officer seen in the viral video, critics have dismissed it as an eyewash. French Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin says the police watchdog is investigating the allegations. The French government is also currently under fire for pushing a bill that is widely being criticized for providing more cover for police brutality. However, after this incident, it has called for revision of the bill.
Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon says she wants to hold a second independence referendum as soon as next year. In an interview, Sturgeon said she expects a vote in the earlier part of the next Scottish Parliament. She says Scotland should have the opportunity to choose whether to become independent earlier rather than later. Sturgeon's Scottish National Party is expected to perform strongly in the 2021 parliamentary elections. Earlier in 2014, Scots voted 55 to 45% against independence in a referendum. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has repeatedly said there will not be another vote in the near future. Britain is planning to impose a new competition regime next year to prevent Google and Facebook from pushing out smaller firms. The UK's Competition and Markets Authority said it will enforce the codes to keep the tech giants in check. The UK's Digital Secretary Oliver Dowden said the concentration of power in few companies has curtailed growth and reduced innovation. He said it was now time to address the issues of small firms and unleash a new age of technology growth. The 2 US companies have said they are committed to working with the UK and giving users greater control over advertisements. US President Donald Trump says he will leave the White House if the Electoral College formally confirms Joe Biden as the next president. This is the closest Trump has come to conceding the November 3rd presidential election. Trump told reporters in Washington it will be hard for him to concede, alleging massive rigging in the polls. The Republican president reiterated that the race was far from over. Early results show Biden secured 306 votes to Trump's 232 under the Electoral College system used to pick US presidents. The tally is far more than the 217 needed to win, and Biden also leads the popular vote by more than 6 million. Electors will meet on December the 14th to vote for the president. It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Germany has surpassed 1 million COVID-19 cases with more than 15,000 deaths so far. In India, the virus has claimed more than 135,000 lives with 9.3 million infections. Globally, the death toll from the virus has crossed 1.4 million with more than 61 million infections. What in this report?
As 2020 draws to a close, global pandemic anxiety appears to have been dialed down a notch as the hopes of a vaccine soar. However, experts have cast doubts over the effectiveness of UK's top vaccine candidate, AstraZeneca. But the British government's chief scientific advisor says the drug is highly effective against COVID-19.
The regulator's got to look at the whole thing. They'll see the total result set, efficacy, safety, the lot, and we've got a great regulator in the UK, and they'll look at it and they'll make their decisions around it. So I think, headline results, this vaccine works, and that's very exciting, and it's going to be put forward for approval. The regulators will need to look at it and decide, and that will be true for all of the vaccines.
The situation in Turkey is worsening as the country recorded its highest daily coronavirus deaths for the 4th consecutive day. Over in Greece, healthcare workers have stopped working temporarily to demand better working conditions.
The hospitals are literally suffering. We hear of tens, hundreds of colleagues being infected by the virus. At this hospital last week, we had at least 100 colleagues that were in quarantine, and about 30 of them were infected. Every day, sporadically, we have new cases, but the management doesn't inform us. And on top of everything, we are being threatened and terrorized as if employees getting infected is our fault.
In Russia, Moscow has extended self-isolation till January 15 for people above 65 years of age and those with certain health issues. South Korea has reported more than 500 new cases for a second consecutive day, while Victoria State, Australia's virus hotspot, has reported no new cases for 28 straight days.
In Pakistan, 54 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 over the past 24 hours, pushing the death toll to 7,897. The Health Ministry says 3,113 tested positive for the virus overnight. The ministry said there are more than 45,000 active COVID-19 cases in the country. It said out of nearly 390,000 countrywide cases, almost 336,000 have recovered. Meanwhile, thousands of Pakistanis are taking part in the final stage clinical trials of a vaccine made by Beijing Institute of Biotechnology. AstraZeneca says it needs to run an additional global trial of its COVID-19 vaccine to assess the efficacy. The company's chief executive, Pascal Soriot, said the study will evaluate why a lower dose performed better than a full one. Soriot says the new study can be faster because it will need fewer subjects as the efficacy is already established. Meanwhile, the developers of Russia's Sputnik V vaccine have offered to conduct joint trials with AstraZeneca. In a Twitter post, they said that combining vaccines may prove important for revaccinations. In another development, South Korea says it foiled North Korea's attempt to hack into companies working on a vaccine. Thanksgiving, typically celebrated with big family dinners, was the latest major event in America to be altered by the coronavirus. More in this report.
3, 2, 1, let's have a parade!
Rethinking rituals has never been much of a part of Thanksgiving, normally one of the biggest holidays in the United States. But in 2020, few things register as normal. 8 months after the pandemic erupted across the US, most major cities remain under strict rules. Many families resigned to meeting on video for turkey dinner. But despite advice from the Centers for Disease Control to stay home, nearly 6 million Americans traveled by air to see their loved ones. In Dallas, Texas, long lines of vehicles were seen at a rapid testing site ahead of the holiday.
We were seeing about maybe 150, 200 people a day. Now we're seeing upwards and topping and over 500 right now.
I don't want to get sick. Jan don't want to get sick, and I don't want to get anybody sick. And so we just had to do something different.
The Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade in New York, a spectacle of giant character balloons that has delighted children for nearly a century, was scaled back significantly. But there was good news too, as a fifth grader in Texas set out to collect 100,000 Thanksgiving meals for people in need.
All of the people that don't have jobs or don't have access to things like food and clothes and all of these essential things that we sometimes take for granted on Thanksgiving Day, which is really sad because one of the most memorable parts about Thanksgiving is the Thanksgiving meal. So knowing that I can help in just the smallest way makes me want to.
Experts fear that Thanksgiving gatherings could significantly boost a death toll that has exceeded 260,000 nationwide.
Football legend Diego Maradona has been buried amid a global outpouring of grief from the streets of Buenos Aires to Naples. Only around 24 relatives and close friends attended the final ceremony in Argentina, but Maradona's coffin, draped in Argentina's national flag and football shirt, was on public display at the presidential palace. Around 1 million turned out to pay their respects despite the threat of COVID-19. There were reports of tear gas and rubber bullets being used as officers in riot gear struggled to hold back the crowd. Maradona died of a heart attack on Wednesday, aged 60. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. India has officially entered technical recession with 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. The Ministry of Statistics said the country's gross domestic product contracted by 7.5% in the third quarter of the financial year. Releasing provisional estimates, the ministry said India's economy shrank by an unprecedented nearly 24% in the first quarter. It is for the first time that the country's economy slipped into a technical recession. Earlier, global forecasting firm Oxford Economics said that India will be the world's worst affected economies despite the pandemic weakens. Pakistan has proposed a trade triangle with China and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. In a virtual address to the 17th China-ASEAN Expo, President Arif Alvi said the alliance will maximize an intra-regional business opportunities. The president said despite the pandemic, Pakistan's economy strengthened due to far-reaching economic reforms. Alvi said Islamabad's stable macroeconomic policies and ease of doing business offered an attractive market. He said this business environment is conducive for both China and the ASEAN countries for trade cooperation. He cited textiles, food produce, surgical goods, minerals and IT as prospective areas of trade interest. China's industrial profits have grown at their quickest pace since 2017. The country's economy is recovering after the COVID-19 outbreak. The National Bureau of Statistics says Chinese industrial firms recorded profit growth of nearly $98 billion. This marks a 28.2% year-on-year gain in October. The Bureau said rising investment income and resilient export demand led to the growth. There was a 6.6% growth in industrial firms as of end September, a 10% increase versus the previous year. Premier Li Keqiang says he expects Chinese economic activity to return to a reasonable range next year. Australia says China's decision to impose preliminary tariffs on its wine is extremely disappointing. In a statement, Agriculture Minister David Littleproud said Canberra will vigorously fight the recent move by Beijing. Littleproud refuted China's claim that Australian wine producers are dumping products into China. He said there was no basis or any evidence for these claims. Earlier, Beijing announced it will impose temporary anti-dumping measures on wine imports from Canberra starting November the 28th. China and Australia have been in a tariff war after Canberra banned Huawei's 5G network. The Wall Street stocks have opened higher as optimism around an economic rebound next year outweighed COVID-19 concerns. The overall market sentiment was also lifted by President Donald Trump's announcement of leaving the White House. The shares of retail giants Amazon, Walmart and Shopify surged nearly 1%. All the major bourses landed in positive territories. Meanwhile, oil prices showed mixed trend over supply concerns and vaccine skepticism. In cricket, Australia beat India by 66 runs in the first one-day international of a 3-match series. The hosts cruised to victory at the Sydney Cricket Ground thanks to a stunning performance by Steven Smith and Aaron Finch. Both of them scored a ton each. Adam Zampa took 4 wickets to restrict India to 308 in reply to a huge target of 375 runs. Smith was declared player of the match. South Africa have returned all clear results after a third round of COVID-19 testing before their opening match against England. The Proteas will be up against England at Newlands Cricket Ground in Cape Town in the first T20 of the series. The 2 players who tested positive last week were not part of this group and remain in isolation. South Africa will be without Dwayne Pretorius, who suffered a hamstring injury during practice and will be out for a month. The 2 countries are scheduled to play 3 T20 internationals and 3 one-day internationals at Newlands and in Paarl. Diego Maradona's former club Napoli have defeated Croatian side Rijeka 2-0 in the Europa League. The Napoli team took the field wearing number 10 shirts with the late footballer's name on the back. Matteo Politano opened the scoring for the Napoli for 4 minutes before the interval. and Irving Lozano doubled it in the second half. In another fixture, Portugal's Braga earned a draw in the match against Leicester City. Premier League leaders Tottenham Hotspurs thrashed Bulgarian side Ludogorets 4-0. All teams competing in the group stage fixtures, including Tottenham, AC Milan, Bayern Leverkusen and Granada, paid homage to the legendary Argentinian. Manchester United have conducted forensic investigations following a cyber attack on the Premier League's club systems. The English club is also working with the National Cyber Security Centre to assess the damage. Last week, United revealed they shut down affected systems to protect data after a cyber attack. United said they had not identified a motive for the attack and rejected suggestions that the attackers still had control of the systems. The club's media channels, including the website and the mobile app, were unaffected. Another weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.